Greetings, mortals. It is I, Remortis, coming at you with another Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader build guide. This time with the highly requested Psyker Pyromancer. The self-immolation Psyker warrior, utilizing the Pyromancer's unique talents with the Forge World, Warrior, and Vanguard talents to improve our durability and allow us to light ourselves on fire and run to our enemies and burn everything around you. We'll be going over the basics of the Pyromancer Psyker and how they function. And then we'll dive into character creation with some Homeworld and Archetype options and how they compare. There will be a tactics and leveling guide as well. But enough of all this. Let's just get straight into it, shall we? But before we do, please like, comment, subscribe for more guides like these. I really appreciate it. And on to the guide. So what is a Psyker? Well, they are essentially humans with psychic abilities that manipulate the warp, which is kind of like dark space, so to speak, like the weird magic natures of the space, and a lot of crazy things can happen with Psykers. And more specifically, in the context of Rogue Trader, you can pick one of 5 different disciplines for your Psykers. You have the Biomancer, the Diviner, the Pyromancer, the Sanctic, and the Telepath. And a Psyker's power is determined by their Psi rating. The higher the Psi rating, the higher your Psyker damage abilities will work. Unfortunately, since we are a sanctioned Psyker, we start off with a Psi rating of 0. So initially, all of our abilities will seem extremely weak, at least until we can get our first Psi rating, and Psi rating 2, 3, 4, etc. For the purposes of this guide, we'll just be going over the Pyromancer, but just note that there are other options to choose from, all of which have their own nuances and different builds and such that mold together really well. So, what does the Pyromancer do differently than the other disciplines? Well, essentially, you light everything on fire. So, starting off with Ignite, so you can cast this on an enemy, and it will deal pretty decent upfront damage, and then extra damage every turn. And going over some of their talents, you'll see that you might not necessarily want to ignite your enemy, but you might want to ignite yourself. Such as with Relentless Blaze. When the Psyker is burning, their Psi rating is increased by 1. And their resolve is also increased. And you don't take momentum damage from being on fire. Sounds good to me, right? And then there is another ability called Burning Blood, which is what made me really decide to see how much we can get out of this build and bring it to the melee. When the Psyker uses a psychic power, all enemies adjacent to the Psyker suffer 4 times their Psi rating direct damage. And direct damage is essentially true damage from other games. It can't be blocked, can't be resisted, and will just do the exact pure amount of damage. This would matter the higher difficulty you go. I mean, it matters in all difficulties, to be fair, but especially in the more difficult ones, such as Unfair. The same also happens when the Psyker suffers damage from burning, bleeding, or melee attacks. On what's that? We're burning ourselves, aren't we? But it only counts when we actually take the burning damage at the start of our turn. However, the melee component is also great. So, say an enemy comes to hit you, and you're fairly tanky, you might take very minimal damage from them. But if they do so much as 1 damage to you, that gets through all of your resistances and parry and all that stuff, they will take this upfront burning blood damage, which is pretty nice. It makes your tank a bit of a porcupine, which is one of my favorite ways to play a tank in most games. But anyways, moving right along, there are some other features here that also help with this kind of playstyle. Body of Flames is pretty sweet, as it will further reduce the damage you take from fire damage, but it also applies to energy weapons such as Laze, Melta, and Plasma weapons, which is what I quite like, since it's a bit more of a universal talent rather than a very niche fire thing. We got Sparks of the Greater Flame. All damage over time effects applied by the Psyker gain critical hit chance, and the chance is equal to all bonuses by critical hit chance. So if you get 100% crit rate from other sources, you'll be having critical damage on your damage over time abilities. And that doesn't just apply to your burning. We'll get to that portion in the later part of the build. And then you also have other abilities, such as Melt Like Wax, which brings some utility from all your fire, besides just raw damage. It will reduce your opponent's armor by stacking -3%. And if you reduce that armor to 0, you start getting rid of their deflection, which is like their initial damage reduction. So, all in all, this is a really solid Psyker discipline. It's a bit different of a playstyle based on how you do it. And personally, I think the two best archetypes to play as would be the Marksman Pyromancer or the Warrior Pyromancer. One of the main reasons why I really like Marksman as a Pyromancer is, A, you want all those extra turns that the Marksman can provide, but there's also a talent that they have that goes in tandem with Blazing Inferno. Blazing Inferno increases your critical hit chance anytime you deal damage by any means, not just your Psyker abilities, but any weapon as well. Whereas the Marksman has the counterpart to this, which is ultimately the same thing, except instead of increasing your crit chance, it increases your critical damage. So that's some pretty sweet synergies there. Alright, so if you're deciding to be a Warrior Pyromancer, which homeworld do we take? Well, honestly, for any kind of Pyromancer, there are two options, in my opinion, to be a superior Pyromancer. That would be the Death World and the Forge World. Why is that? Well, essentially, they both have an ability that reduces damage you take from burning damage. Forge World's version is Fires of the Forge, which also applies to burning and flame weapons. Okay, cool. And the Death World has Hellish Life. But this also applies to Toxic and Bleeding as well. Alright, so what are the main differences for the Death World versus the Forge World? Well, the Death World is pretty sweet in my opinion. I mean, they're both great, don't get me wrong. One of some of the perks that the Death World has is once per combat, when you get below 30% health, you'll gain a 20% health shield. Pretty sweet. But then the other really awesome feature that pairs really well with this build, well, the warriors in general, is the Death World characters. Whenever the Death World character has at least one temporary hit point from any source, they'll have an innate 20% bonus to dodge and armor. And that is just awesome. And then with the Pyromancer itself, it has an interesting interaction with this ability called Wounded Beast. Every injury that your character suffers will increase your agility and your willpower by 5. And it's supposed to stack. Currently in this pre-release version, it's not working correctly. But hopefully that'll be fixed on launch. In my opinion, Death World does make an amazing melee Pyromancer. However, I feel that the Death World Pyromancer is best suited for a Marksman, because you will like that all the agility and the willpower, and it's a little bit safer for you. And the only real benefits you get is from hurting yourself, from you having the temporary hit points from Survival Instinct, which does pair with Warrior, don't get me wrong. But I think that this might be the Death World might be a better option for a Marksman. And then let's move on to the Forge World. So, when you first pick a Forge World character, you have to pick between 3 different enhancements for your character. The Analytic System, which will increase your crit hit chance by your intellect. Locomotion System, which will increase your movement and your dodge, which can be good for this build, especially if you lean onto the dodge side of things, and maybe decide to be a flame assassin or something like that. Then this would probably be the way to go. Locomotion System on assassins is amazing. But what I'm going to come here for, I'll be taking Subskin Armor. But this isn't the reason why we're in Forge World. This is just a nice little bonus perk to enhance your damage reduction, since we'll be stacking Toughness as one of our main stats. So why do we want the Forge World besides this? Well, so yes, we get that bonus damage reduction against burning, just like the Death World. However, we also get Steel of the Forge. While wearing heavy armor, the Forge World character gains a bonus to movement points, 1 deflection, and the more important part, cannot fall prone. Prone is a debilitating condition in this game. Essentially, it's a stun, and you get knocked down, and everyone just gets extra bonuses to hit you, and you can't defend yourself. So, not falling prone is key to success. There's another caveat. If you decide to go with the Heretic Conviction playthrough, there are some bonuses that you can unlock later in the game, depending on how much of a devotion you are to heresy. There is this particular buff that will increase all of your stats by 20 for 2 turns, and then when it ends, you fall prone. And if you have this talent here, you do not fall prone. So that's just some awesome synergy if you're deciding to be a Heretic Pyromancer. And honestly, what could be more heretical than a Pyromancer lighting himself on fire and trying to give everybody warm hugs? Heresy, I say. Heresy! And then they can't tell you burn the witch because you're already on fire. So, anyways. So yeah, Forge World, I think, is superior if you're going to do a frontliner, like, tankier version of the build. Otherwise, you can go for the Death World and be a little bit more riskier. They both have their caveats. Pick which one you prefer, but I really like the Forge World, since I like to wear heavy armor with this. And there's some pretty cool heavy armor, Psyker armors that I'm going to show you later. So keep that in mind. All right. Now that we have all that out of the way, we're going to be selecting the Warrior. In another video, I'll go more in depth on the Pyromancer Marksman, but I'll probably be pointing out some key components as we get to that. Otherwise, and as for our level 1 increments, I decided to level up Agility to 10. Since we're not really going to be increasing it throughout the rest of the build, I just want to get it out of the way in the beginning. I decided to also increase our Strength, because we're going to try to get to heavy armor. It's not going to be one of our main stats. It's going to be a good stat to have, don't get me wrong. It's probably our third most important stat. Our highest stat that's most important is our Toughness, followed by our Willpower, and then Strength is after that, and Weapon Skill. Let's just move on to the leveling build. Now keep in mind, all of these talents may or may not change upon launch, at least in terms of the order you get them. And of course, if you prefer a certain talent, you can grab whatever you would like first. Okay. So, essentially, your tactics for this build, you're going to be running up to as many melee enemies as possible, preferably ones you can stand next to. And then you're going to light yourself on fire with Ignite, which will do some decent damage because of burning blood. And also, you're lighting yourself on fire, so that's going to be setting you up. Most likely, you'll have to end your turn, or you can try to do some other cheesy stuff, like using Orchestrate Flames, so that way you can not... such as using Orchestrate Flames, which will make you not be able to put out your fire, at least by taking tests. You can still restore it on accident, in my opinion, from other means. But you can make it so that you do not innately... But you can make it so you do not innately try to resist your fire. Also, you'll take half as much damage from your burn, if at all at this point. And then, additionally, anytime you make an attack with a melee weapon, you'll be doing whatever flame damage you have on your dots on yourself as extra bonus damage, which never misses and cannot be resisted from at least what I'm seeing. And it does pretty solid damage too. And this will tie into other parts of the build, particularly with retaliations that we'll be getting. Alright. And then, on our next turn, when we can actually use our actions again, we're going to cast Firestorm on ourself. What this does is it will spread a certain target that's already on fire and ignite everyone around them and give them that same condition. And also deal some damage based on that burn. Pretty sweet. But wait, there's more. Then we're going to cast Inflame. Until the end of combat, all burning conditions will deal extra damage based on your psi rating. And every burning creature in combat immediately suffers damage. The last part of it is awesome, but the front part is the creme de la creme. You can cast this every turn, and it will keep increasing your fire, just ramping you up. Pretty fucking sweet. And then there's also Molten Beam, which is just a giant fire laser. Pretty awesome. But I don't actually end up using this too much. It's still cool to use, though, but it's not completely necessary. But come on, it's a giant laser fire beam. Why would you not pick it? All right, so let's go to the leveling guide. So, after careful considerations and comparing talents and such, and also playing the builds, I've come up with a warrior into Vanguard. And let's get into why we'll be taking this. So with warrior, obviously we start with charge, which you use at least a decent amount in the beginning. So as for your skills, You'll probably want to max out your warp or your carouse or athletics if you don't want to bring Abelard along. And then at level 3 we get Endure, which is great because it's also just going to help reduce the damage we take from our own burns. And for our first talent, we're going to pick up Thick Skin. It's just a flat +1 deflection to all damage, which is great. And then our parry chance is equal to 25% of our warrior's total armor. Awesome. Since we're going to have lots of ways to increase our armor later. Then I'll be picking up the Pyromancer talent, Burning Blood, just so we can start getting that melee stuff out of the way and also help us deal with some melee mobs in the early game. Because anytime they deal damage to us, we get free damage on them. Fantastic. Then we'll start leveling up our toughness. At level 6, we'll be picking up Orchestrate Flames. This way we can set ourselves on fire and make it so any burns we have on us will be applied to our melee attacks, and it'll always do that extra burning damage. Pretty freaking sweet. And then I decided to increase my warp skill here. Level 7 will increase our strength, and we'll pick up the Psi rating with our general talent. So generally, whenever we get a general talent, there's actually a lot of stuff we're going to be picking up. Typically, I'll be dipping things into Psyker whenever it applies, or I might have to go and pick up other things in here, and we'll go over that. Obviously, you can pick things earlier if you'd like, but you'll see as we follow along. All right, at level 8, we'll be increasing our lore warp further, and we'll be picking up Relentless Blaze. So this will let us do some extra damage whenever we're burning, and also makes it so we increase our resolve, and even further, we no longer hurt our momentum whenever we're burning. As for our upgrades for our ultimate, I decided to go with upgrade number 2. Until the end of combat, the warrior gains +4 MP for each kill, and may use their MP after attacking or using abilities. This is great, because we're going to be moving a lot, and killing things with fire, and we can keep moving around. It's pretty sweet to have. So next up, we'll pick up the Pyromancer ability, Body and Flames, to reduce our damage we take from fire, and also reduce damage we take from energy weapons, lays, Melta, and Plasma. And then we'll increase our strength. Next, we'll pick up our Firestorm ability. This is going to let us so we can spread our burn that we could apply to ourselves onto everybody around us. So just be careful if you might hit an ally. Sorry, Abelard. That's what your Medicae's for. And then I decided to level up my Psi rating too because I saw it allow me to pick it there pretty early, which is kind of odd. I'm kind of curious how they might have fixed this in the live game. Maybe they fixed the level requirements, who knows. But anyways, I picked up the Psi rating too. Then we increased our toughness further, because I think our strength's at a solid level at this point. I'm probably going to forget about it for now. And then I decided to actually level up my Medicae at least once, just so we can actually use Medicae on other people that we might accidentally light on fire. So anyways, I decided to pick up Seal the Forge here. Obviously, we don't have heavy armor yet, but we're going to pick that up right after. Then I decided to level up my Carouse. Next, we level up our Willpower, and then we pick up our Heavy Armor Proficiency. You could probably grab it before the Steel the Forge, and then use your Heavy Armor. And this will just further enhance your capability to use it. And then for our last upgrade on our Daring Breach, we took the third option. Makes it so you become a priority target for every enemy you hit, which can be very important later when we decide to go Vanguard. And more importantly, we increase our parry by 20% and our deflection by 2 for the rest of combat. It's just very important. This is what's going to be allowing us to be an amazing tank while lighting everyone on fire. All right, so now that's level 1 through 15. Moving on, I decided to go to Vanguard. I did consider the Arch-Militant to be a good option, but I ultimately decided to go with Vanguard. Because one thing, no matter what archetype you're going to be playing as, your Psyker doesn't really care about most of the talents that either of them provide, or abilities for that matter, which is great, because that means we can spend all those extra talents and ability slots on our Psyker stuff. But anyways, let's get into why the Vanguard is pretty solid for this build. So anytime you take damage, you'll be gaining a stack of Unyielding Beacon. Each stack increases your resolve by 1, up to a maximum of 15. Nice. Temporary wounds applied to the Vanguard will stack, but only remain stacked until you start your turn. Okay, cool. That's neat. So one thing to realize, is anytime you are attacked, this also includes from burning yourself. So you can potentially stack your undeal to begin by hurting yourself with your fire. Pretty sweet. More resolve is always great. That means we can get our momentum increased, which means we can use our ultimates quicker. Alright. So that's level 16. Level 17 will pick up Inflame, which will enhance all the damage we do on our dots. And the cool thing is, you can always use this every turn without attacking anybody, and it won't consume your attack slot. But it has an internal cooldown of 1 turn, so you only can cast it 1 turn, even if you get extra turns from other sources, so keep that in mind. One thing I realized that you're probably going to want to grab earlier is the general Psyker talent, Subtle Manipulation. This will make it so that you're damaging its psychic power while being threatened by enemies in melee range will not provoke attacks of opportunity. This is very important. Sometimes you might want to provoke the opportunity, to be fair, so you can get some free damage from your Burning Blood, but if you're playing on harder difficulties or you're going up against boss targets, you might not want them having a free extra attack that it might potentially one-shot you. So you might want to grab Subtle Manipulation. On your level 18, on your Vanguard, I'm going to grab Enduring Shield. While the Vanguard has at least 1 temporary wound, they will gain extra % bonus to parry and armor based on your toughness, which is great. Level 20, we will increase our willpower further to help make our damage be better. And we'll do the same in the next level. Increase our willpower, and then we'll grab Renitent Beacon or Enduring Shield, whichever one you decide to take first. You want to grab these 2 early. These are both really good talents that the Vanguard provides us that we really only care about. After that, we pretty much don't really care about too much things. Alright, and then you get another ability. I had decided to go with Molten Beam, just because it's fucking cool. Shoot a giant death laser. At this point, you might even consider dipping into our next Psyker discipline, which we didn't talk about before, which I will probably be opting to go into Biomancy. And we'll go over that after we're done with this leveling build. And we'll show you why Biomancy pairs really well with these Pyromancer. So anyways, yeah, you can pick up Molten Beam, or you can decide to dip into Biomancy. And then we'll increase our athletics just because I'm trying to round things up. Because I realize I'm not bringing Abelard anymore and I need an athletics person. So, there's that. Alright, then we decided to pick up Backdraft. This probably isn't a necessary pick this early. I just like having it. Because, I mean, you're going to want to pick it up later anyways, but it's a really good ability. Anytime you use a Psyker power, used by your Psyker, and that deals damage, a random target within 2 cells will also take half the damage that the other target took. And I'm pretty sure this applies to all targets in AoE. They won't trigger out this talent again, but just that AoE in general should hit everyone. Although it does work the way it's worded, it might just hit only 1 target. Either way, free damage from your AoE damage or just any damage in general is pretty sweet. It also should apply to your Ignite, so you can potentially do some extra damage. Again, this talent isn't super necessary. I just wanted to test it out. And then we'll pick up Fires of the Forge. Or, if you're the Death World, the Hellish Life, which will further reduce the damage you take from fire damage. Pretty nice. Now you're not going to feel anything, pretty much, for the most part, when you take any damage from your burning attacks, or just burning attacks in general. Okay, now I decided to pick Sparks of the Greater Flame, so we can start critting on all of our dots. And then I picked up Combat Master, because even though we had Subtle Manipulation, I'm pretty sure, because the enemies has melee superiority, they were overriding my Subtle Manipulation, and were still able to get attacks of opportunity against me, even when I casted things. So make sure you pick up melee superiority. You're probably going to pick this up earlier. Just something to think about. And then we'll increase our warp and our toughness. And that's what I currently have. But we could keep on going throughout the Vanguard itself. But essentially, you're going to start leaning towards your Biomancy abilities. We got most of the things we want from here. However, you may want to pick up talents that affect your ability to counterattack things, or even picking up an ability that lets you counterattack, such as Defensive Stance. When paired with the talent that upgrades your defensive stance. It'll allow you to get additional attacks of opportunity. So that's something to consider, especially since we're not really going to be making too many melee attacks, but having free counterattacks for attacks of opportunity, and while your sword is, or whatever weapon you're using is ignited by you being on fire with Orchestrate Flames, that's just free extra damage on top of your free chance to hit from your attacks of opportunity. So now you can start to see where all this stuff really comes together and becomes a very cohesive, synergistic, burning build. It's awesome. It's a lot of fun, and it's not something I realized I would really enjoy until I really started diving on all the different connections. All right, so let's get into the Biomancer abilities. Since Heinrich's here is a Biomancer, we'll just go look in his talents. All right, so Biomancy is a healing discipline, but they also have some really great talents that synergize amazingly with the Pyromancer. And there's some good abilities there too that we can pick up. All right, so one of the first abilities you're going to want to pick up as a Biomancer, especially if you're the Pyromancer, is Biophysical Distortion. All the attacks from the Psyker, including damaging psychic powers, and this also counts from weapons from melee or ranged, or even grenades. Any source of damage your Psyker will do, your Psyker character will do, will also poison them. So you'll be doing burning damage and poison damage over time. You'll be doing some crazy damage in the end game. I don't know how crazy compared to Argenta or any marksman with a heavy weapon, but we'll get down to that road whenever we get there. This is going to be really crazy, especially since we crit on all of our damage over time effects, and that should apply to this poison as well. And then there are some interesting talents, such as Pulse of Life. Whenever the Psyker heals himself or another character with psychic power or an effect applied by a psychic power, this healing can critically heal with a chance equal to your willpower bonus, and just, heal you for extra damage. Extra healing is always nice. But we'll get into what healing spells we'll pick up from the Biomancer. Alright, so then we can pick up Strange Vitality, which will further increase our toughness anytime we are under the effect of any Psyker power, whether it be our buffs, or more importantly, our burns. So this is a really good ability, and it's just going to make our tankiness insane. Here's another decent ability, Adrenaline Surge. On the first turn of every combat, all Psyker powers with the Biomancy discipline cost 1 less. And then there's some other decent Biomancer abilities here that are okay. Nothing super crazy. I guess you just look into the Psyker talents as well. So obviously you're going to want to increase your Psi ratings as soon as possible. We'll want to pick up Subtle Manipulation so that we don't get attacks of opportunity. Psychic Barrage is okay. It only really applies to the initial damage of spells, so it doesn't really apply to our dots, which is okay. But we're not really investing in Ballistic Skill in this version. This is more of an ability for your Marksman variant, or other Psykers, honestly. Second Sight could be useful to help you reach certain targets that are further away based on your perception, but again, we're not really investing in perception. And then that's about it. Oh, there's also the ability called Blade of Light. If you just are using force weapons, this can give you some extra damage and have extra armor penetration. Pretty nice, especially if you have that other sword right here that deals extra damage based on your Psyker rating. Where did I put it? I put it somewhere. Here it is. So yeah, Psy rating damage, and then you also can get that even doubled basically by using the other one, or using that talent. All right, now let's look into the Biomancy spells. So when you're playing as a Biomancer, you start off with Iron Arm, which is just a buff that increases your strength and toughness until the end of combat. So this is a really good ability if you're not in range of anybody, just to cast on your main character or on yourself, so that way you can get more toughness and strength. Pretty sweet. And onto our other abilities. We'll get Invigorate, which is a heal. It's actually pretty solid for our burning build, because it will potentially restore certain effects based if that target's already max health. It'll remove stun, bleeding, fatigue, blinded, immobilized, staggered, and fresh injury from the target. Pretty nice for a free heal. Enfeeble is actually really good, and this could work with your Twist Flesh ability. It's a really good debuff until the end of turn. until the end of combat, all targets. Oh yeah, so at the end of combat, all targets within an area suffer penalties to their agility and strength, but also increases the damage or also increases oncoming damage. Pretty fucking awesome. It's a really great debuff. It's not the biggest range, as you can see here. It's a 3x3 diamond, so you only can hit so many targets with it. But it's a solid debuff. Invigorates a decent heal. And then next you can pick up Regeneration. Until the end of combat, the target recovers your psi rating divided by 2 health every turn and can potentially remove a nasty effect. Notice that burning is not on there. That's just another reason it shows Biomancy pairs really well with the Pyromancer. And then as for our convictions, if you decide to go to the Heretic route, which I do recommend for this build, we will be gaining a 20% chance to save combat stimulants or medkits after using it. I don't really use either of those. I probably should use more of those, but I don't. But this is nice to have, I guess, to help prolong those. Yeah, I should start using those more often. Destroy the weak. For the first round of combat, everyone in the Rogue Trader's party has a 25% chance to regain 1 AP after killing an enemy. However, triggering this effect immediately manifests psychic phenomena. Is that bad? We'll find out. As we move on to our next ability, once we unlock it, is Gifts of the Warp. Any psychic phenomena increases momentum of the Rogue Trader's party by 2 to 10, instead of decreasing it like it normally would. Very nice. And then we come back to our level 4 feature, Demonopathy. As mentioned before, this is the ability that will buff all of your stats by 20 for 2 rounds and then make you fall prone. Or if you have that Forge World talent that makes it so you cannot be prone while wearing heavy armor, that shouldn't work on you. So, pretty sweet. Then I'll showcase some of the items I am using currently, as well as some other items. Alright, so as you can see here is my current Pyromancer melee guy. It's pretty sweet. I alternate between using these 2 swords. I got some pretty neat Force Sword, which matters. It also increases your damage based on your psi rating. Granted, it's only 2 right now, but if we light ourselves on fire, that becomes 3. And I'm also really close to getting another psi rating, so that could potentially put us at 4, just from burning ourselves. So yeah, I alternate between that and my 2-hander. Both are pretty sweet options. This one does crazy damage. It's pretty cool. And then I picked up this chest armor pretty early, which just really helps your tankiness. The second you get this is when you really start feeling like a tank. It's pretty sweet. And then here's an interesting item. Pack of the Reagents. This set of chemical reagents increases the damage of all bleeding, burning, or toxin effects applied by the user by 2. Extra damage is always nice, especially since we can enhance it with our other abilities. And then there's a pair of Pyromaniac boots. The wearer cannot suffer the burning effect by walking over burning cells. This is a downside, however, the second portion is pretty sweet. The wearer inflicts plus 3 additional stacks of burning whenever they stand on burning cells. So while you might not be able to inflict the regular version of burning, you can still use your warp fire, don't get me wrong. But just standing on a burning cell, perhaps by standing in a fire space created by fire grenades or flamethrowers, you'll be able to add extra stacks of burning damage, which is always nice. And then there's some other just stuff that you just get throughout the game. Nothing too crazy. But damn, do I look cool. And this is only like mid-Act 2. Like maybe the first quarter of Act 2, honestly. Or first third. Anyways, pretty sweet.
And now, some gameplay footage.
One step closer. Show them no mercy. Destiny reshaped. Purpose guides me. I need no guidance. Blessed One won't fall. Ruin. One step.
I'll show you why navigators are feared.
I will trust shall reign. Is not the end. Sow the seeds of discord. Purpose of blood-soaked tribute. I will triumph. Purpose guides me.
If I may.
And well, that's the guide for now. I really hope it helped you open your eyes to the possibilities of pyromancy within Rogue Trader. And also open your eyes to how crazy it can be and how much synergy there is throughout the game through different archetypes and different disciplines of Psykers and just all sorts of things. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more guides like these, and please share them around to help spread the knowledge. Or you can also comment down below and tell me how you prefer to make your Pyromancer. There's no wrong option here, and there's lots of really good ideas that you can make. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next guide. Farewell for now.